Chapter 8 deals with measuring with the various sizes of hypodermic syringes. This slide shows that there's quite a range in syringe volume sizes, all the way from half a milliliter to 60 milliliters, which is quite a large syringe. No matter what the volume a syringe holds, it is always calibrated in milliliters, except specialized insulin syringes, which we learned the other day is measured in units. So for example, on the left-hand side here, you see a half a milliliter, and you can see that that is noted right down here, and you've got 0.5 total volume here. But each one of these calibrated marks or hash marks is still a milliliter. This particular one is measured in 100ths. So the line that is pointing right here, that is, it's kind of small, but it is 0.42. So you've got, you're able to measure very small, minute amounts in this very small syringe, but it is still in milliliters. Whereas on the other side here, you've got a 20 milliliter syringe, and the calibration marks on this one still in milliliters, but instead of 100ths, they're measured in whole milliliters. So you've got 5 right here, so each one before that is a whole milliliter. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, and then your 5th one here. The most critical part of this whole lesson will be that you understand, even though they're measured in milliliters, you must look carefully at the syringe and determine what increments of milliliters. Is it 100ths? Is it 1/10? Is it a whole milliliter? Is it 2/10 of a milliliter? Because the various syringes do differ. How to read a syringe. Now some of these are a little bit of a review because we've done this in 1413, but we'll go over it again. You notice here on this slide, this syringe has medication in it, and there's 2 rings here on the plunger. You read from the top plunger, so it would be this one. And also another thing that you need to be aware of when reading these is the first long calibration is always 0. So that would be 0. And then this would be 1. You've got a 20 milliliter syringe. So each of these calibrations, I'm not hitting the mark very well, that's 2. Each of these are in whole milliliters. The most common syringe that you're going to be using is the 3 milliliter, and it is calibrated again using the metric unit milliliter. Sometimes these will be, you can partially see the milliliter right down here. Sometimes it will say cc, but we've talked about that before, that a milliliter is equal to a cc, so those are essentially the same. You need to always use milliliter because that is the accepted terminology now. As you can see, the milliliter is, or excuse me, the 3 milliliter syringe is broken down into 1/10 calibration. So we start with 0 here at the long line, and then each one after that, which I can't seem to hit it, is 1/10 of a milliliter. So when you get down to this next long line, you've got 0.5 milliliter. So important to note that on the 3 milliliter syringe, it is each hash mark is 1/10. You've got your longer lines that denote half a milliliters or 1 milliliters here, but that each one in between is 1/10. Okay, so here's another 3 milliliter syringe. Let's say that we needed to draw up, say 1.3 milliliters of medication in this syringe. Well, we know that we can come down here to the 1, because that's our whole number, and then we know that this is counted in 1/10. So we need to count down 3 more hash marks, so it would be 1, 2, and this would be our third one here. So we would fill our syringe to that level right there and draw our medication in until we came to that line right there. So let's review the 3 milliliter syringe. The shorter calibration marks indicate tenths of a milliliter. The longer calibration marks indicate half, 1, 1.5, 2, 2.5, and 3 milliliters. The tenths of a milliliter are written as decimal fractions always. So you've got your 0.1, your 0.6, 0.9, etc. So here's another 3 milliliter syringe. What is the volume of medication in the syringe? I'm going to give you a few seconds to count that down. Remember your tenths of a milliliter. Go down to your 1 and then count your tenths. And you should have come up with, on this one, 1.2 milliliters. With HIV and hepatitis B and any number of things that you could accidentally be exposed to through a needle stick, safety syringes have become quite popular. They were developed to decrease the risk of being accidentally stuck with a contaminated needle. There are quite a number of different ones that are manufactured with different names and slightly different techniques. Most healthcare facilities will use some brand. You need to become familiar with the type that's used in your facility. This particular one here, you can see that it is a one-finger technique. Once the injection is given, she just slides that up and the needle is covered. Same thing with this particular one. It's just slidden up with one finger and the needle is then covered. This particular one actually, after the injection is given, it will retract, as you can see here, into the cover of the needle cover. All for your safety. Next, we'll talk about tuberculin syringes. This is the most common volume of 1 milliliter syringe. It is calibrated in hundredths, which is noted by the shorter calibration marks, and we'll see it on the next slide. And then each 10th calibration mark has an Arabic number printed on the syringe barrel. For example, you will see 0.1, 0.2, 0.3. So each number that you see on the syringe barrel is 1/10 of a milliliter, and then the hash marks in between are going to be in 100ths. And these, the 1/10ths, are noted by the longer calibration marks. So here you see an example. This, number 1, is 1/10 of a milliliter. Now, one thing that students commonly do is they get this syringe confused. If that's 1/10 of a milliliter, then your other long mark here is going to be 0.05. And a lot of times people will want to put 0.5, but you see your 0.5 is down here. So don't make that mistake. This is in 1/100ths. And so your number 2 is 2/10 or 0.2 milliliters. I'm going to give you a few seconds. This is a TB syringe. What is the volume of medication in the syringe? Remembering that this is calibrated in 100ths. So you've got your 0.1, your 0.2. Then if you count down your calibration marks, you should have come up with, always put your 0 in front, 0.24 milliliters. Now we'll look at larger volume syringes, and we'll see some of these in the next, in a couple of slides on. Your most common are going to be your 5 milliliter, your 10 milliliter. Those probably are the most frequently used. And then also you may occasionally use a 20 milliliter or a 60 milliliter. Now again, even though these larger volume syringes are still measured in milliliters, the calibration marks are again different. The shorter calibration marks located on a 5 and 10 milliliter syringe are measured in 0.2 milliliters. So in other words, each mark is going to be 2/10 of a milliliter. The longer calibration marks measure 1 mil. We'll see that in the next slide. So for example, on this 5 milliliter syringe, we know that our first long line is 0. So if you count the number of marks, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, down to a milliliter, and then you know it's going to each of those are going to have to be 2/10 or 0.2 milliliters. So this is counted, of course, differently than what we saw on our smaller volume syringes. You've got to be sure to pay attention to that. The 10 milliliter syringe is the same way. Your first long line up here is 0, and then if you'll count the number here, you're going to have 5 hash marks, which means that each of those have to be 0.2 milliliters or 2/10 of a milliliter. Each of your numbers here indicate 1 whole milliliter. So I'm going to give you a few seconds here. This is a 10 milliliter syringe. We know that each number is a whole milliliter. So what is the volume of medication in this syringe? Hopefully you came up with 5 milliliters. Syringes larger than 10 milliliters are calibrated in full milliliter measures. In other words, each hash mark or each calibration mark is equal to 1 full milliliter. So this is a 20 milliliter syringe. What is your total volume that has been drawn up in this syringe? Remembering that each hash mark is 1. The answer is 16 milliliters.